My brother and his wife left me alone with my 8-year-old nephew. He had been mute since birth. The moment the door closed, he stood up, stared straight at me, and spoke. What he said froze my blood. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. Renee Calder's fingers drummed against the steering wheel as she pulled into the driveway of the house she'd grown up in. The sun hung low over Briar Glen, Ohio, casting amber light across the lawn her father had obsessed over. Perfectly edged, perfectly green. Dead now for 3 years, and Tyson still kept the grass just as neat. Some patterns never broke. She cut the engine and sat for a moment, studying the white 2-story colonial through her windshield. Same black shutters. Same brick pathway leading to the front door. Same feeling of weight settling over her shoulders, like a coat she'd forgotten she owned. This is temporary, she told herself. 3 days, maybe 4. Tyson had called her 6 days ago. His voice had that particular flatness he used when he was pretending everything was fine. The same tone he'd used throughout their childhood when their father came home drunk, when their mother locked herself in the bedroom for days at a time. Lorna and I need a weekend away, he'd said. Work's been brutal. We just need some space to breathe. Renee had heard what he didn't say. The marriage is fracturing. We're barely holding on. Help. She'd said yes, because that's what she always did with Tyson. The younger brother who'd needed protecting, who'd needed someone to stand between him and their father's anger, who'd needed her to lie to teachers about the bruises. She'd spent her entire childhood as a shield. Old habits died hard. Renee grabbed her overnight bag from the passenger seat and walked up the pathway. Before she could knock, the door swung open. Tyson stood there looking older than 36. His hairline had receded further since she'd seen him at Christmas. His eyes were bloodshot, and his polo shirt was wrinkled in a way their father would have never tolerated. Hey, he said, stepping aside to let her in. Thanks for doing this. Of course. Renee set her bag down in the foyer. The house smelled like coffee and something burnt, toast maybe. Where's Noah? Kitchen table. He's been quiet today. Tyson's jaw tightened. Well, quieter than usual, I mean. Renee knew what that meant. Noah hadn't spoken a word since he was 2 years old. 6 years of silence. The doctors had cycled through diagnoses: developmental delay, selective mutism, autism spectrum disorder. None of them quite fit. The label that stuck was anxiety disorder, which Renee thought was a convenient way of saying we don't know. She walked through the living room into the kitchen. Noah sat at the table with a coloring book open in front of him, his small fingers gripping a blue crayon. He was coloring inside the lines, perfectly methodically. No mess, no chaos. 8 years old and already trained to contain himself. Hey, buddy, Renee said softly. Noah's eyes flicked up to her, dark brown, alert, tracking her movement across the kitchen with an intensity that always unsettled her. He didn't smile. He nodded once, then went back to his coloring. Behind her, Lorna descended the stairs with a rolling suitcase. Tyson's wife was petite, blonde, exhausted. Her makeup was careful, but couldn't quite hide the puffiness around her eyes. We really appreciate this, Lorna said, not quite meeting Renee's gaze. The hotel is just 2 hours away. We'll have our phones on if you need anything. We'll be fine, Renee assured her. Tyson moved through the kitchen in quick, efficient movements, checking the fridge, pointing out Noah's medication schedule, reminding Renee about bedtime routines. His hands moved too much. He couldn't seem to stand still. When he bent down to hug Noah goodbye, the boy went rigid. Not afraid, just braced. Be good for Aunt Renee, Tyson said. Then, quieter, almost too quiet, don't make things difficult. Noah nodded. Tyson straightened and turned to Renee. He pulled her into a hug that lasted a beat too long, his grip tight across her shoulders. Don't spoil him, he murmured near her ear. The words landed with weight. Not a request. A warning. Renee pulled back and smiled. Have a good weekend. The door closed behind them. The deadbolt clicked. The house seemed to exhale. Renee stood in the kitchen, listening to the silence settle. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, a pipe gurgled. Noah kept coloring, his crayon moving in steady, controlled strokes. She needed to think. Renee always thought better when her hands were busy. She moved to the sink and started washing the breakfast dishes Tyson and Lorna had left behind, 2 coffee mugs with lipstick stains, a plate with congealed egg yolk, a butter knife crusted with jam. The water ran hot. Steam rose. She scrubbed methodically, rinsing each dish and setting it in the drying rack. Behind her, a chair scraped against the linoleum. Renee glanced over her shoulder. Noah had stood up. He was watching her with that same intense focus, head slightly tilted. She expected him to grab a toy from the bin in the corner, or maybe point at the pantry if he was hungry. Instead, he walked closer, stopped a few feet away, and spoke. They fight worse when you're gone. The plate slipped from Renee's hands and clattered in the sink. Water splashed up, soaking the front of her shirt. She turned slowly, her pulse hammering in her ears. Noah stood there, small and still, watching her reaction with an expression too calm for a child who'd just broken 6 years of silence. Renee's throat was dry. "Noah, you just talked." He nodded. No excitement, no fear, just that same steady watchfulness. "They told me not to," he said. His voice was clear, articulate, not the rusty, uncertain voice of someone learning to speak. He'd been speaking all along, just not where anyone could hear. "But you're different." Renee's knees felt weak. She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. 1,000 questions crowded her mind, but she pushed them aside and focused on what mattered. She crouched down slowly, bringing herself to his eye level. "What do you mean they fight worse when I'm gone?" Noah looked at the table, at his abandoned coloring book, then back at her. "At night, when I'm supposed to be asleep, Dad yells. Mom cries. Sometimes doors slam." Something cold and familiar settled in Renee's chest. Recognition. She knew that kind of household. She'd grown up in one. "How long has this been happening?" she asked gently. Noah shrugged. "Always, I think. But it got louder last year." "And they told you not to talk?" Dad said. Noah hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He said if I kept being difficult, it would make Mom more stressed. He said doctors cost money. He said I needed to try harder. Renee's jaw tightened. She kept her voice soft. "You're not difficult, Noah. You hear me? You're not the problem." Noah's eyes met hers again, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something underneath the calm. Relief, maybe. Or hope. "I'm hungry," he said quietly. "Okay." Renee stood and opened the refrigerator. "How about grilled cheese?" "Yes, please." She made 2 sandwiches while Noah returned to the table. He didn't color anymore. He just watched her move around the kitchen, pulling out bread, slicing cheese, heating the pan. When she set a plate in front of him, he picked up the sandwich with both hands and took a small, careful bite. "This is good," he said after swallowing. "Thanks, buddy." They ate in comfortable silence. Renee's mind was racing, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd learned a long time ago that children could read adult faces better than most people realized. If she showed panic, Noah would retreat. After lunch, she suggested they watch a movie. Noah picked an animated film about a robot, and they settled on the couch together. Halfway through, he scooted closer and leaned against her side. Renee wrapped an arm around his shoulders and felt how small he was, how fragile. She thought about Tyson's words. Don't spoil him. Don't make things difficult. What Tyson didn't understand was that Renee had stopped making things easy for him a long time ago. She'd left Briar Glen at 18 and built a life in Chicago that had nothing to do with their father's ghost or their mother's apologies. She'd gotten a degree in social work. She'd worked for family advocacy organizations. She'd learned exactly how systems failed children and exactly how to document when they did. And she'd learned to recognize the signs. A child who went silent to keep peace. A parent who framed his son's trauma as inconvenience. A family that functioned only through denial. She'd seen it 100 times in case files. She'd never thought she'd see it in her own family. That night, after Noah was asleep, Renee sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She pulled up a fresh document and began typing. Date, Friday observation 1. Noah Calder, age 8, spoke for the first time in my presence. Language skills appear typical for his age. No developmental delays evident in speech production or comprehension. Statement, paraphrase, they fight worse when you're gone. Dad yells. Mom cries. Sometimes doors slam. Context. Subject displayed no signs of distress while speaking. Behavior suggests conscious choice to maintain silence in parents' presence rather than inability to speak. She saved the document and closed the laptop. Then she sat in the dark kitchen and remembered. She remembered being 12 years old, lying in her bed and listening to her father shout at her mother in the next room. Remembered Tyson crying in the hallway outside her door, too scared to come in, too young to understand why their father was always angry. Remembered their mother's excuses the next morning. He's just stressed. Work is hard. Don't make things worse. Remembered learning that safety meant silence. Renee looked up at the ceiling, at the bedroom directly above where Noah slept. She wondered how many nights he'd lain awake listening. How many times he'd learned that being small and quiet and invisible was the only way to survive in his own home. He's 8 years old, she thought, and he's already learned to disappear. Outside, a car drove past. Its headlights swept across the kitchen wall and faded. The house settled into deeper silence. Renee stood and walked upstairs. She paused outside Noah's door and listened. His breathing was steady even. She eased the door open an inch and peered inside. He was curled on his side, clutching a stuffed elephant. In sleep he looked even smaller. She closed the door softly and went to her own room, her old childhood bedroom that Tyson had converted into a guest space. The walls were painted beige now. Her posters were gone, but the window still looked out over the same backyard where she'd spent hours hiding from her father's temper. Renee lay on the bed, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. She didn't plan on staying long in Briar Glen, but plans had a way of changing. The next morning, Renee woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of something burning. She bolted upright and rushed downstairs. Noah stood on a step stool in front of the stove, poking at something in a pan with a spatula. Smoke rose from what might have once been scrambled eggs, but now resembled charcoal. "I wanted to make breakfast," he said when he saw her. Renee quickly turned off the burner and moved the pan to a cool spot. "That's really thoughtful, buddy. But the stove is dangerous." "I know. I'm careful." He pointed to the spatula. "I used this so I wouldn't burn my hand." She noticed he'd turned the heat to its highest setting. The eggs had never stood a chance. "How about we make breakfast together?" Renee suggested. They scraped the burnt eggs into the trash and started over. This time, Renee showed Noah how to crack eggs into a bowl, how to whisk them with a fork, how to keep the heat low so they cooked slowly. He watched every movement with fierce concentration, asking questions about technique and timing. "You're a quick learner," Renee said as she slid perfectly fluffy eggs onto 2 plates. "I watch a lot," Noah said. They ate at the table. Noah told her about school, how his teacher always talked too loud, how the other kids didn't try to include him anymore because they thought he couldn't answer. He talked about his favorite books, about a tree in the backyard he liked to climb when his parents weren't watching. "Why don't they want you to climb trees?" Renee asked. "Mom says I'll fall and get hurt. Dad says I need to focus on getting better, not playing." "Better at what?" Noah shrugged. "Talking, acting normal, not being expensive." The word expensive hit Renee like a slap. That wasn't a word an 8-year-old should internalize about himself. "You're not expensive," she said firmly. "You're a kid. Kids aren't supposed to worry about money." "Dad worries about it a lot," Noah said simply. "I hear him tell Mom we can't afford more therapy. That's why I stopped going." Renee set down her fork. "When did you stop going to therapy?" "4 months ago. Maybe 5. She filed that information away. Another note for her document. After breakfast, Renee took Noah to the park 3 blocks away. It was a warm Saturday, and the playground was full of children running and screaming and climbing. Noah stood at the edge of the wood chip border, watching. "Do you want to play?" Renee asked. He shook his head. "They won't play with me." "Because you don't talk at school?" "Yeah, and because I'm weird." Renee crouched beside him. "You're not weird. You're smart and careful and thoughtful. Those are good things." Noah looked up at her. "Do you really think that?" "I know it." He considered this, then walked toward the swings. Renee followed. She pushed him gently at first, then higher as he laughed, a sound that made something in her chest loosen and tighten at the same time. They spent 2 hours at the park. Noah talked the entire time about space, dinosaurs, how clouds formed, whether dogs understood human language. He had opinions on everything. He asked questions that showed he'd been thinking about the world deeply, quietly for years. When they got back to the house, a car was parked in the driveway. Tyson's sedan. Noah's expression changed instantly. The light went out of his eyes. His shoulders hunched. He stopped talking mid-sentence. Renee felt her stomach drop. They weren't supposed to come back until tomorrow. Noah didn't respond. He walked toward the house with his head down, his hands shoved in his pockets. Renee followed, watching how he seemed to shrink with every step. Tyson opened the door before they reached it. "Hey, we decided to come back early. The hotel was terrible." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze moved from Renee to Noah, assessing. "How's my boy?" Noah nodded once. Silent. "He's been great," Renee said carefully. "We went to the park." "Good, good." Tyson stepped aside to let them in. Lorna's upstairs taking a nap. The drive back was rough. Renee watched Noah disappear into the living room and sink onto the couch. He picked up a book and opened it, but she could tell he wasn't reading. He was performing normalcy. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Tyson said, jerking his head toward the kitchen. Renee followed him. He leaned against the counter and crossed his arms. The smile was gone now. Did he have any episodes? Tyson asked. "What kind of episodes?" "You know, meltdowns, tantrums, acting out." "No," Renee said honestly. "He was fine." Tyson's jaw worked. "He can be manipulative. Don't let him fool you." "Manipulative how?" "He knows how to play people. Make them feel sorry for him." Tyson's voice had an edge now. "He does it with Lorna all the time. Turns on the waterworks. Makes her think I'm the bad guy." Renee kept her expression neutral. "He didn't cry once." "Good." Tyson pushed off the counter. I worry about him, you know. I want him to be okay. But sometimes I think he doesn't try hard enough. He's 8. I know how old he is." Tyson's tone sharpened. "I'm his father. I know what's best for him." Renee held his gaze. She saw her brother clearly in that moment, not the boy she'd protected, but the man he'd become. The same tight control their father had worn like armor. The same inability to see his own role in the damage. "I should get going," Renee said. "I'll grab my stuff." "You don't have to leave right now. Stay for dinner." "I have work tomorrow. Long drive back." It was a lie. She'd taken Monday off. But she needed space to think, and she couldn't do that here with Tyson watching her. She went upstairs, packed her bag quickly, and came back down. In the living room, Noah was still on the couch, still pretending to read. She walked over and crouched beside him. "I have to go, buddy," she said softly. He looked at her. In his eyes was a question he couldn't ask aloud. "Please don't leave me here." Renee's throat constricted. She put a hand on his shoulder and squeezed gently. "I'll call you this week, okay?" Noah nodded. He understood. He was good at understanding things that weren't said. Renee hugged Tyson goodbye, a quick, perfunctory embrace, and walked out to her car. As she backed down the driveway, she saw Noah's face in the front window, small and pale and watching. The drive back to Chicago took 3 hours. Renee spent the first hour replaying every conversation, every observation. The second hour, she called her colleague Amanda, who specialized in child welfare cases. "I need advice," Renee said. Hypothetically, Amanda repeated, amused. "Go ahead." Renee laid it out carefully, a child who'd stopped speaking at age 2, a family dynamic that showed signs of emotional manipulation, parents who'd terminated therapy for financial reasons, a child who'd admitted he was told not to talk. "Hypothetically," Amanda said when Renee finished, "that sounds like a case that should be documented, carefully and thoroughly. And hypothetically, if you're personally involved, you need to be even more careful about how you proceed." "I know." "Do you?" "Because family cases get messy fast. If you're planning to intervene, you need to be ready for the fallout." Renee gripped the steering wheel tighter. "What would you do?" "Honestly, I'd document everything. Dates, times, statements. I'd build a timeline. Then I'd talk to a family court advocate and see what options exist." Amanda paused. "But Renee, if this is your brother we're talking about, you need to ask yourself if you're ready to burn that bridge. Because once you start this, there's no going back." "I know," Renee said again. She spent the third hour in silence, watching the highway unspool in front of her. When she got home to her apartment in Chicago, she didn't unpack. She sat at her kitchen table, opened her laptop, and began typing a second entry. Date, Saturday observation 2. Subject's behavior changed dramatically upon father's return. Ceased verbal communication immediately. Body language indicated hypervigilance. Hunched shoulders, averted gaze, physical withdrawal. Observation 3. Father, Tyson called her, described subject as manipulative and stated subject doesn't try hard enough. Expressed concern about being perceived as the bad guy. Defensive posture suggests awareness that his parenting methods are questionable. Observation 4. Subject's therapy was terminated approximately 4 to 5 months ago due to financial concerns. No indication that alternative support systems were put in place. She saved the document and sat back. Through her window, Chicago glittered in the darkness. A million lights, a million lives, all of them separate from the small, quiet boy in Briar Glen who'd learned to disappear. Renee thought about her father, about the way their mother had made excuses for him, about how Tyson had learned to survive by becoming just like him. She thought about Noah's face in the window, and she made a decision. On Monday morning, Renee called Tyson. He answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hey," she said. "How's everyone doing?" "Fine." Noah's back to his usual self. "Quiet." "That's good." Renee kept her tone light. "Listen, I was thinking I could come back next weekend. Give you and Lorna another break." There was a pause. "Really?" "Yeah. I enjoyed spending time with Noah. And you guys could use the support." She could hear the relief in Tyson's voice. "That would be amazing. Lorna's been stressed about work, and I've got a project deadline coming up." "No problem. I'll drive in Friday evening." "Thanks, Renee." Seriously. After she hung up, Renee sat at her desk and stared at her phone. She'd just bought herself more time. Time to observe. Time to document. Time to build a case that couldn't be argued away with excuses. She opened her laptop and created a new folder. Noah documentation. Inside, she began compiling everything. Medical records she could access through their mother's shared email account. The password had never changed. School reports she could request as his aunt. Photos she'd taken casually over the years at family gatherings, studying them now with professional eyes. In one photo from Christmas, Noah sat on the floor surrounded by torn wrapping paper. His smile looked strained. Tyson stood behind him with a hand on his shoulder. Too tight, the grip of someone maintaining control rather than offering comfort. Renee studied that photo for a long time. Then she saved it to the folder and kept working. The week crawled by. On Wednesday, Renee called the house during the day while Tyson and Lorna would be at work. Noah's school number was programmed into her phone from previous visits. A teacher answered. Briar Glen Elementary. Hi, this is Renee Calder. I'm Noah Calder's aunt. I wanted to check in on how he's doing in class. Oh. The teacher sounded surprised. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. His parents are just busy, and I wanted to get an update. There was a rustling of papers. Well, Noah's a sweet child, very well behaved. He doesn't participate much, obviously, but he turns in his homework on time. Does he seem happy? Another pause. That's hard to say. He's quite withdrawn. We've encouraged his parents to continue therapy, but I understand there were financial constraints. Right, Renee said neutrally. Has he ever acted out? Any behavioral issues? Never. If anything, he's almost too well-behaved. Some of the other teachers have commented that he seems, I don't know how to put this, alert, I guess, like he's always watching and waiting. Waiting for what? I wish I knew. Renee thanked her and hung up. Another entry for the document. School reports significant withdrawal and hypervigilance. Child described as waiting. No behavioral issues, suggesting control rather than developmental problem. On Friday evening, Renee drove back to Briar Glen. This time, she'd packed more carefully. Her laptop, a small digital recorder, a camera, and a notebook she'd bought specifically for this purpose. Plain professional, the kind courts would recognize as legitimate documentation. When she arrived, Noah answered the door. His face lit up for just a second before he remembered himself and smoothed his expression into neutrality. But that second was enough. Aunt Renee, he said quietly. Hey, buddy. Ready for another weekend? He nodded. Tyson appeared behind him, already with his jacket on. Perfect timing. We're running late for dinner reservations. Where's Lorna? In the car. He grabbed his wallet from the hall table. Same rules as last time. Bedtime's 8:30. He needs to take his vitamin with dinner. And... I've got it, Renee interrupted. Go. Have a good time. Tyson hesitated, looking at Noah, then at her. Call if there's any problems. There won't be. The door closed. The car pulled away. Noah waited exactly 10 seconds, then turned to Renee and spoke in his clear, careful voice. I'm really glad you're here. Me too, Renee said. She knelt down. Noah, I need to ask you something important. And I need you to be completely honest with me, okay? Okay. Do you feel safe here? Noah's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, a crack in the careful mask he wore. Sometimes. When don't you feel safe? When Dad's angry. When Mom cries. When they fight at night and I can hear them through the walls. His voice was still calm, almost clinical. I feel safest in my closet. I made a nest there with blankets. Sometimes I sleep there instead of my bed. Renee's hands clenched into fists. She forced them to relax. Does your dad ever hurt you? Physically. No. He just yells. And sometimes he grabs my arm too hard when he's frustrated. It doesn't really hurt, though. I bruise easy. Show me. Noah rolled up his sleeve. There, on his upper arm, were 4 faint bruises, oval shapes that perfectly matched adult fingertips. Renee pulled out her phone. Can I take a picture? Why? Because I want to help you. But to do that, I need to show people what's happening. Is that okay? Noah studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. She took 3 photos from different angles, making sure the lighting was clear. Then she put her phone away and pulled Noah into a hug. He was stiff at first and used to casual affection, but gradually relaxed. "You're not in trouble," Renee murmured. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Noah said into her shoulder, "but sometimes I feel like I did." That night, after Noah was asleep, Renee sat in the kitchen and added to her documentation. The photos, the statements, the observations about his makeshift nest in the closet. Another sign of a child who didn't feel secure in his own bedroom. She pulled up a legal website and began researching Ohio's laws on child custody, on third-party guardianship, on what evidence was needed to prove emotional neglect. It wasn't enough to show that Tyson was a bad parent. She had to show that Noah would be demonstrably better off with her. That meant building not just a case against Tyson, but a case for herself: stable income, safe housing, ability to provide care. She had all of those things. She'd been building them for years. What she hadn't expected was that she'd need to use them like this. Around midnight, Renee heard a sound from upstairs. A soft thump, then quiet footsteps. She set her laptop aside and walked to the stairs. Noah sat on the top step in his pajamas, hugging his knees. "Can't sleep?" Renee asked softly. He shook his head. "Want to come down? We can watch something quiet." Noah descended the stairs and curled up beside her on the couch. Renee put on a nature documentary with the volume low. Within 20 minutes, he was asleep against her side, breathing slowly and evenly. Renee stayed awake, watching the screen without really seeing it. She thought about Amanda's warning. Once you start this, there's no going back. She thought about the life she'd built in Chicago, separate from her family's dysfunction. She thought about Noah's face in the window, watching her leave. And she thought about how sometimes the only way to save someone was to break apart everything around them. Outside, a storm was rolling in. Lightning flickered in the distance. Thunder rumbled, low and ominous. Renee looked down at Noah's sleeping face and whispered, "I'm not leaving you here." The next morning, Saturday, dawned gray and humid. Noah woke up on the couch, disoriented, and Renee helped him upstairs to brush his teeth and get dressed. They made breakfast together, pancakes this time, which Noah insisted on flipping himself. He managed not to send any to the floor, and he beamed with pride. "I did it," he said. "You did. You're getting good at this." After breakfast, Renee suggested they do something creative. "You like drawing, right?" "I like coloring. I'm not good at drawing." "Let's try anyway." She pulled out paper and markers, and they sat at the kitchen table. Renee drew simple shapes: a house, a tree, a sun. Noah watched, then tentatively began his own drawing. It started as a house, but then he added windows, a door, a chimney. Inside the windows, he drew small stick figures. "That's your house?" Renee asked. "Yeah." Noah added more details: curtains, a cat in one window. Then, in a window on the second floor, he drew a small figure lying in bed. "That's me." "What are you doing?" "Listening." He colored the figure carefully, then added dark scribbles around it. "That's the scary sounds at night." Renee's chest tightened. "What do the sounds sound like?" "Loud. Angry. Sometimes things break, like when Dad threw a plate last month. It smashed on the wall." "Did anyone get hurt?" "No. Mom cleaned it up. Then they didn't talk for 3 days." Noah picked up a red marker and drew a large figure standing in another window. "That's Dad. He's always watching to make sure I'm being good." The drawing was childlike but disturbingly clear. Renee took a photo of it with her phone, then saved the original in a folder she'd started keeping in her bag. That afternoon, she took Noah to a local diner for lunch. The waitress was friendly. Asking Noah questions, he answered with nods and head shakes. She didn't seem bothered by his silence. But then a woman approached their table, someone Renee vaguely recognized from high school. Is this Tyson's son? The woman asked. Yes, my nephew Noah. Oh, what a sweetheart. I heard he has special needs. It's so wonderful that you're helping out. The woman bent down, speaking slowly and loudly to Noah. Hello, Noah. How are you today? Noah stared at her, expressionless. The woman straightened. Well, you're doing such a good thing. It must be hard on Tyson and Lorna. After she left, Noah looked at Renee. People think I'm stupid. You're not stupid, Renee said firmly. Not even close. I know, but they don't. Does that bother you? Noah shrugged. It's easier when they don't expect things from me. That sentence haunted Renee for the rest of the day. Easier when they don't expect things from me. A child who'd learned to lower the bar so far that invisibility became safety. That evening, while Noah watched a movie, Renee stepped outside to make a phone call. She dialed a number she'd found earlier in the week. A family court advocate named Beatrice Towns who specialized in custody cases involving emotional neglect. Ms. Towns? My name is Renee Calder. I work in family advocacy in Chicago. I have a situation I need advice on. Go ahead. Renee explained, carefully, clinically, a nonverbal child who actually could speak. A home environment with signs of emotional abuse, evidence of control, pressure, trauma responses, financial neglect of therapeutic needs. Are you a mandated reporter in Illinois? Beatrice asked when she finished. Yes. Then legally, you're required to report suspected abuse. I know, but I'm in Ohio, and this is my nephew. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. There was a pause. Doing it right, or doing it in a way that gets you custody? Renee was silent for a moment. Both. Honest. Good. Here's what you need to know. Beatrice's voice was crisp, professional. Ohio family courts prioritize family reunification. Unless you can prove imminent danger, physical abuse, sexual abuse, severe neglect, they'll push for the parents to retain custody with oversight. What you're describing is serious, but it's also difficult to prove in court. What do I need? Documentation. Lots of it. Medical records showing the child was functional before the home environment deteriorated. School reports. Therapy notes if you can get them. Statements from the child, recorded if possible. Photos of any physical evidence. And testimony from professionals who can speak to the child's psychological state. I have most of that. Then you need a lawyer, a good one who specializes in family law. And you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Your brother will fight back. He'll paint you as an outsider interfering in his family. He'll say you're turning his son against him. Courts hear that all the time, and sometimes it works. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't, especially when the evidence is clear and the child has a voice. Beatrice's tone softened slightly. You're doing the right thing. Just make sure you're ready for the cost. After hanging up, Renee stood in the backyard and looked up at the house. The light in Noah's bedroom was on. She could see his shadow moving past the window. She wasn't sure she was ready for the cost, but she was sure Noah couldn't afford to wait. On Sunday morning, Tyson and Lorna returned just after breakfast. They looked marginally better, less exhausted, more put together. Lorna actually smiled when she hugged Noah. We missed you, baby, she said. Noah hugged her back, but said nothing. The silence had returned like a familiar costume. How was he? Tyson asked Renee. Perfect. No problems at all. Good. Tyson glanced at Noah. Go upstairs and clean your room, bud. Noah left without a word. Once he was gone, Lorna turned to Renee. Her smile had faded. Can I talk to you for a minute? Outside. Renee followed her onto the front porch. Lorna wrapped her arms around herself, even though it wasn't cold. I know you're trying to help, Lorna said, but I need you to understand something. Noah is complicated. He's not like other kids. I know that. Do you? Lorna's voice sharpened. Because Tyson told me you've been asking questions. About therapy, about school, about us. And I need to know, are you judging us? Renee kept her expression neutral. I'm not judging. I'm trying to understand. We're doing our best. You don't have kids. You don't know how hard this is. Lorna's eyes were red-rimmed. Everyone has opinions. The teachers, the doctors, the neighbors. Everyone thinks they know better than us. But at the end of the day, he's our son. We get to decide what's best. Even if what you're deciding isn't working. Lorna's face flushed. You don't get to say that. You swooped in for 2 weekends and think you know everything. You don't. You left. You don't live here. You don't see the meltdowns, the sleepless nights, the constant worry. I left because staying here wasn't safe for me, Renee said quietly, just like it wasn't safe for Tyson. We both know what this house was like growing up. Lorna's expression shifted, anger mixing with something else. Fear, maybe. That's different. Is it? Tyson isn't like your father. No, Renee agreed. He's different, but different doesn't always mean better. Lorna opened her mouth, then closed it. For a moment, she looked like she might say something real, something true. Then the moment passed, and her walls went back up. Just don't make things harder, Lorna said finally. We're barely holding on as it is. I know, Renee said gently. That's exactly what I'm worried about. She left an hour later, promising to visit again soon. As she backed out of the driveway, she saw Noah's face in the window again. This time, he lifted one hand in a small wave. Renee waved back. Then she drove to Chicago and started making phone calls. Monday morning, Renee took a personal day and met with a family lawyer named Patricia Hayworth. Patricia's office was small but organized, filled with case files and legal books. She listened to Renee's story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. This is messy, Patricia said when Renee finished. Family cases always are. But you have something most third-party custody petitions don't. Solid documentation and a child who can articulate his experience. That's powerful. What are the odds? Honestly, 50-50. Maybe 60-40 in your favor if the judge is sympathetic. You're asking a court to remove a child from his biological parents when there's no physical abuse and no drugs involved. That's a high bar. What do I need to do? Patricia tapped her pen against the pad. First, we file for temporary guardianship. That requires showing that the child is in immediate emotional danger and that the parents are unable or unwilling to provide adequate care. We'll need statements from mental health professionals, school personnel, and ideally someone who's observed the family dynamic firsthand. I can get those. Second, we need the child's testimony. Ohio law allows children over 7 to express their preference in custody cases. Noah's 8, so his voice matters, but only if we can demonstrate he's competent to make that choice and not being coached. He won't need coaching, Renee said. He knows what he wants. Good. Third, and this is the hard part, you need to be prepared for your brother to destroy you in court. He'll say you're bitter, vengeful, jealous. He'll dig into your past, your relationships, your finances. He'll make you the villain. Let him try. Patricia studied her. You're sure about this? Because once we file, there's no walking it back. Your relationship with your brother is over. It was over a long time ago, Renee said. I just didn't want to admit it. She signed the retainer agreement that afternoon. By Wednesday, Patricia had drafted the petition for temporary guardianship and started contacting witnesses. On Thursday, Renee called Noah's school and spoke directly to the principal. She identified herself as his aunt and explained that she was concerned about his well-being. Would you be willing to provide a statement about his behavior and academic performance? She asked. There was a pause. Are we talking about a custody situation? Potentially. I see. The principal's tone was carefully neutral. I'd need to consult with our district attorney before committing to anything. But off the record, several of us have been worried about Noah for some time. If there's a formal process happening, we'd want to support whatever's best for him. Thank you. On Friday, exactly 1 week after her last visit, Renee drove back to Briar Glen. This time, she wasn't staying at the house. She'd booked a hotel room 20 minutes away. She called Tyson from the road. Hey, I'm coming into town tonight. Thought I'd take Noah out for dinner if that's okay. Tonight? We weren't expecting you. I know. Spontaneous. Is that a problem? There was a pause. No, it's fine. What time? 6. Sure. See you then. When Renee arrived, the tension in the house was immediate. Tyson stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. Lorna hovered behind him, nervous. Noah sat on the stairs, watching. Just dinner, right? Tyson said, he needs to be back by 8 for his bedtime routine. Of course. Renee smiled pleasantly. Come on, Noah. Let's go. Noah descended the stairs slowly. Tyson caught his shoulder as he passed. Behave, he said quietly. Noah nodded. In the car, Noah waited until they were 2 blocks away before speaking. You're doing something, aren't you? What makes you say that? You have your serious face. The one adults get when they're planning things. Renee glanced at him. You're very observant. I have to be. Noah looked out the window. Are you going to take me away from them? Renee pulled into the restaurant parking lot and turned off the engine. She twisted in her seat to face him fully. Noah, I'm going to ask you something very important. And I need you to answer honestly, okay? Okay. If you could choose, if you could live with me instead of your parents, would you want that? Noah didn't hesitate. Yes. Even though it would mean leaving your school, your house, moving to Chicago. Yes. Even though your mom and dad would be upset and hurt. Noah's eyes were clear and steady. They're always upset and hurt. Nothing I do makes them happy. At least with you, I can talk. Renee's throat tightened. This is going to be hard, buddy. There will be lawyers and judges and people asking you lots of questions. Your parents will fight to keep you. Are you ready for that? Will they make me go back? Not if I can help it. Noah nodded slowly. Then I'm ready. They went inside and ordered burgers and milkshakes. While they ate, Renee explained what would happen next, carefully in terms an 8-year-old could understand. I'm going to file papers with the court that say I want to be your guardian. That means a judge will decide if you should live with me or stay with your parents. The judge will want to talk to you. They'll ask you questions about how you feel and what you want. What should I say? The truth. That's all. Just tell them what life is like at home, how it makes you feel, and what you want. Will Dad be there? Maybe. But you don't have to be scared. There will be other adults there whose job is to protect you and make sure you're safe. Noah absorbed this, chewing thoughtfully. When? Soon. Maybe a couple weeks. Okay. He took a sip of his milkshake. Aunt Renee? Yeah. Thank you for believing me. Renee reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Always, buddy. Always. When she drove him back to the house at 8 sharp, Tyson was waiting on the porch. He came down to the car and opened Noah's door. Go inside, he told Noah. Once Noah was in the house, Tyson turned to Renee. His expression was hard. What's going on? He asked. Nothing. We had dinner. Bull. Lorna said you've been calling the school. One of our neighbors saw you taking pictures last weekend. What are you doing, Renee? She kept her voice calm. I'm worried about Noah. He's fine. He's not. Tyson's jaw clenched. You need to back off. He's our son. This is none of your business. It became my business when he told me he doesn't feel safe here. He's 8 years old. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He knows exactly what he's talking about. And so do you. Renee held his gaze. You're doing to him what Dad did to us. You're teaching him that his feelings don't matter, that survival means silence, that family means enduring pain. I am nothing like Dad, Tyson said, his voice shaking with fury. I have never hit my son. I have never. You don't have to hit someone to hurt them. You know that. We both lived it. Tyson stepped back, his face pale. Get out. Don't come back. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, Renee said quietly. She drove away without looking back. In her rearview mirror, she saw Tyson standing in the driveway, a dark silhouette against the porch light. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. In those 3 weeks, Renee worked with Patricia to build their case. They gathered statements from Noah's school, medical records documenting his selective mutism diagnosis and the cessation of treatment, testimony from a child psychologist who reviewed Renee's documentation and agreed to testify. They also recorded Noah's statement, 20 minutes of him sitting in Patricia's office, calmly explaining what life was like in his house, how he pretended not to talk, how he heard his parents fight, how his father called him expensive and manipulative, how his mother cried but never did anything to change things. Do you love your parents? Patricia asked on the recording. I think so, Noah said, but I don't want to live with them anymore. Why not? Because I'm tired of being scared. Tyson and Lorna hired their own lawyer, a bulldog named Daniel Kraus who specialized in parental rights cases. He immediately filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that Renee had no standing to seek custody and that this was a vendetta against her brother. The judge denied the motion, but ordered a home evaluation and appointed a guardian ad litem to represent Noah's interests. The guardian ad litem, a stern woman named Helen Vargas, interviewed everyone: Renee, Tyson, Lorna, Noah's teachers, the neighbors. She spent 4 hours at Tyson's house observing the family dynamic. She spent 3 hours with Renee in Chicago, touring her apartment and reviewing her documentation. 2 days before the hearing, Helen called Renee. I'm recommending temporary guardianship be awarded to you, Helen said without preamble. Noah's testimony is compelling. The documentation you've gathered shows a clear pattern of emotional neglect. The home environment is not physically dangerous, but it is psychologically harmful. Renee closed her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The judge might disagree, and Mr. Kraus is going to fight dirty. Be prepared. The hearing was held in a small courtroom in Briar Glen. Renee arrived early with Patricia. They sat at the plaintiff's table, reviewing notes. Across the aisle, Tyson and Lorna sat with Daniel Kraus. They didn't look at Renee. Noah was in a separate waiting room with Helen, who would bring him in only if the judge wanted to hear from him directly. Judge Margaret Chen presided, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She reviewed the filings while everyone waited in tense silence. This is a petition for temporary guardianship, Judge Chen finally said, looking up. Ms. Calder, you're asking me to remove a child from his biological parents based on claims of emotional abuse and neglect. That's a serious accusation. Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said, standing. And we believe the evidence will show that Noah Calder is suffering significant psychological harm in his current home environment. Mr. Kraus. Daniel Kraus stood. He was a large man with a booming voice. Your Honor, this is nothing more than a vindictive sister trying to punish her brother for perceived childhood slights. There is no abuse here, no neglect. Noah Calder is a special needs child with complex medical issues, and his parents have done everything possible to care for him. Ms. Calder has no children of her own, no experience with special needs, and frankly no business interfering in this family. Judge Chin looked at Patricia. Let's hear your evidence. For the next 2 hours, Patricia presented their case. The medical records showing Noah's functional abilities, the school statements describing his intelligence and hypervigilance, the child psychologist's testimony explaining how selective mutism could be a trauma response rather than a developmental disorder, the photos of the bruises on Noah's arm, the recording of Noah's statement. When the recording played, Tyson's face went white. Lorna cried quietly. Then it was Krause's turn. He called Tyson to the stand. "Mr. Calder, do you love your son?" "Yes, more than anything." "Have you ever struck him?" "Never." "Have you ever threatened him?" "No." "Why do you think your sister is doing this?" Tyson looked directly at Renee. "She's never forgiven me for not protecting her when we were kids. Our father was difficult. Renee took the brunt of it. I think she sees me as an extension of him, even though I'm nothing like him. This isn't about Noah. It's about her trying to rewrite the past." Patricia cross-examined him carefully. "Mr. Calder, did you tell Noah he was expensive?" Tyson hesitated. "Therapy is expensive. I may have mentioned that." "Did you tell him he was being manipulative?" "He knows how to push buttons. That's not unusual for kids." "Did you tell him not to embarrass the family?" "I told him to behave. That's normal parenting." "Your definition of misbehavior includes speaking, correct?" "No. He doesn't speak. He can't." "He spoke to your sister. Extensively. For hours." Tyson's jaw tightened. "I don't know what she did to get him to perform for her, but he doesn't talk. Any doctor will tell you that." "The doctors told you he has anxiety. They told you to continue therapy. You stopped taking him 4 months ago." "We couldn't afford." "You own a house. You both have stable jobs, but you chose not to prioritize your son's mental health." "Objection," Krause barked. "Argumentative." "Sustained," Judge Chin said. "Move on, Ms. Hayworth." Lorna took the stand next. She was trembling, her voice barely audible. "Mrs. Calder, do you believe your son is happy?" I think he's struggling, but we're helping him." "How are you helping him without therapy?" "We're trying to be patient, to give him time." "Do you and your husband fight?" Lorna glanced at Tyson. "Sometimes. All couples do." "Where is Noah when you fight?" "In his room, asleep." "Are you certain he's asleep?" Lorna didn't answer. Finally, Judge Chin asked to speak with Noah. Helen brought him in, and he sat in a chair next to the judge's bench. Small, calm, impossibly composed for an 8-year-old. "Noah, I'm Judge Chin. Do you understand why you're here?" "Yes, ma'am. You're deciding where I should live." "That's right, and I want to hear from you. What do you want?" "I want to live with Aunt Renee." "Why?" "Because she lets me talk. Because she doesn't get mad when I ask questions. Because I'm not scared in her house." "Are you scared in your parents' house?" Noah looked at Tyson and Lorna. "Sometimes. When they fight. When Dad yells. I know he's not yelling at me, but it's still scary." "Do you love your parents?" "Yes, but I don't want to live with them." Judge Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she dismissed Noah and asked everyone to sit. "I've reviewed all the evidence," she said. "I've listened to the testimony, and I've heard directly from Noah. Here is my ruling." Renee felt Patricia's hand on her arm, steadying her. This is not a case of severe physical abuse or neglect. However, it is clear that Noah Calder is experiencing significant emotional distress in his current home environment. The evidence shows that his selective mutism is at least partially a coping mechanism for family dysfunction. His parents, while not intentionally abusive, have failed to prioritize his psychological well-being. Tyson started to rise, but Krause pulled him back down. At the same time, Judge Chun continued, "Ms. Calder has demonstrated that she is capable and willing to provide a stable, supportive environment. She has documented a pattern of behavior that is concerning, and her professional background in family advocacy gives her unique insight into Noah's needs." Renee held her breath. "Therefore, I am granting temporary guardianship to Renee Calder for a period of 6 months. During this time, Noah will live with Ms. Calder in Chicago. Mr. and Mrs. Calder will have supervised visitation rights twice monthly and will be required to complete a parenting course and family therapy. At the end of 6 months, we will reconvene to determine if permanent guardianship is warranted or if custody should revert to the parents. The gavel came down. Lorna sobbed openly. Tyson sat frozen, staring at the judge's bench. Renee felt Patricia squeeze her arm. "We won," Patricia whispered. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like breaking something that could never be repaired. Outside the courtroom, Helen brought Noah out. He ran to Renee and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Can we go home now?" he asked. "Yes," Renee said, her voice thick. "We can go home." She looked up and saw Tyson standing 20 feet away. He stared at her with an expression she couldn't read. Anger, betrayal, pain, all mixed together. She held his gaze. She didn't apologize. She turned and walked away with Noah's hand in hers. 6 months passed like water through fingers, fast, inevitable, changing everything in its wake. Noah flourished in Chicago. Within 2 weeks of living with Renee, he was speaking constantly. Within a month, he'd made friends at his new school. Within 3 months, his teacher called Renee to tell her that Noah had tested into the gifted program. "He's remarkably bright," the teacher said. "Has anyone ever evaluated him for advanced placement?" "No," Renee said. "They were too busy labeling him broken." Noah started therapy with a child psychologist named Dr. Patel, who specialized in trauma recovery. The sessions were slow at first. Noah had learned to hide his feelings so well that he struggled to identify them. But gradually, with patience and safety, he began to open up. "He's carrying a lot of guilt," Dr. Patel told Renee after one session. "He believes he caused his parents problems. That's common in children from high-conflict homes. How do we help him with that?" Time, consistency, repeatedly showing him that his needs matter and that he's not responsible for adult emotions. Renee threw herself into that work. She set up routines, breakfast together every morning, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories every night. She let Noah pick his own clothes, choose his own hobbies, express his own opinions. She never punished him for speaking. She never told him to be quieter, smaller, easier. She let him take up space. The supervised visitations with Tyson and Lorna were stilted, painful. They happened twice a month at a family services center with a social worker present. Noah was polite but distant. He answered their questions in short sentences. He accepted their hugs but didn't initiate them. "Don't you miss us?" Lorna asked during the 3rd visit, tears streaming down her face. "Sometimes," Noah said honestly, "but I like where I live now." Tyson said very little during the visits. He watched Noah with an expression that might have been regret or might have been resentment. It was hard to tell. He completed the required parenting course but refused to attend family therapy, claiming it was a waste of time. Lorna went to therapy alone. She called Renee once, 3 months into the arrangement. "I think you were right," Lorna said quietly. "About Tyson, about the house, about everything. What are you going to do?" Renee asked. "I don't know yet, but I can't keep pretending everything's fine." 2 weeks later, Lorna filed for divorce. Renee didn't feel triumphant about that. She felt sad for the family that could have been, sad for the child who'd paid the price of adult dysfunction, sad for Tyson who'd never learned to be different from their father. But she didn't regret her choice. The final custody hearing was scheduled for exactly 6 months after the initial ruling. Renee, Noah, and Patricia sat in the same courtroom with the same judge. This time, Tyson came alone. Lorna had signed away her custody rights voluntarily, stating that she believed Noah would be better served living with his aunt. Judge Chen reviewed the reports, Noah's school performance, his therapy progress, the social worker's observations during visitation. "Mr. Calder," the judge said, "you've completed the parenting course, but refused family therapy. Why?" Tyson stood. He looked thinner, older. I didn't see the point. My son made it clear he doesn't want to live with me. Forcing therapy seemed like prolonging the inevitable. Do you believe Ms. Calder has been a good guardian to Noah? There was a long pause. Then, yes, he's doing better. I can't deny that. Do you want to fight for custody? Another pause. No, Your Honor. I think he's where he needs to be. Judge Chin nodded. Then I am granting permanent legal guardianship to Renee Calder. Mr. Calder, you will retain visitation rights, but they will continue to be supervised until such time as you complete family therapy and Dr. Patel determines it's appropriate for unsupervised contact. The gavel came down again. This time it felt final. Outside the courtroom, Tyson approached Renee. Noah had gone to the bathroom with Patricia. I don't forgive you, Tyson said quietly. I'm not asking you to, Renee replied. You took my son. I saved your son. There's a difference. Tyson's eyes were hollow. You're just like Dad. You know that? Self-righteous. Judgmental. Always certain you're right. If being like Dad means protecting a child from emotional harm, then I'll take that comparison. Renee's voice was steady. But you're wrong. I'm not like him, because I'm willing to admit when a family is broken. He never was, and neither are you. He was my son first, and he'll be his own person eventually. The question is whether he'll look back on his childhood and feel grateful or traumatized. I'm making sure it's the former. Tyson stared at her for a long moment. Then he walked away. Renee watched him go. She felt no victory, no satisfaction, just a deep, bone-tired sense of completion. Patricia emerged with Noah. Ready? Yeah, Renee said. Let's go home. In the car, Noah was quiet for the first 15 minutes. Then is Dad sad? Probably, Renee said honestly. Is it my fault? No, buddy. Adults are responsible for their own feelings. You didn't do anything wrong. But if I'd been a better kid... Stop. Renee pulled into a rest stop and turned to face him. You were never a bad kid. You were a scared kid. Those are different things. Your dad's sadness isn't about you. It's about him realizing that the way he was raised wasn't healthy and that he repeated those patterns with you. That's hard to face, but it's not your job to fix it. Noah processed this. Do you think he'll ever want to see me? Like really see me? I don't know. Maybe. People can change if they want it badly enough, but you can't make him want it. All you can do is live your life and be yourself. I like being myself now, Noah said quietly. Good. Keep doing that. They drove back to Chicago as the sun set behind them. The city skyline appeared on the horizon, lights beginning to flicker on in windows across the towers. Renee felt Noah relax in the passenger seat, his head tipped back against the headrest. Aunt Renee? Yeah. When we get home, can we make tacos? I've been craving them all day. Renee smiled. Absolutely. And can I call Jamie? I want to tell him about the cool bug I found in the parking lot. Sure. And can we watch that documentary about the ocean? The one with the octopus? We can do all of that. Noah grinned, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his whole face. This is the best day. Renee's throat tightened. Yeah, buddy, it really is. That night, after tacos and phone calls and documentaries, Renee tucked Noah into bed. He had his own room now, painted blue at his request, with posters of planets on the walls and books stacked on every surface. You okay? She asked as she pulled the blanket up to his chin. Yeah. Noah yawned. Aunt Renee, do you think Mom will be okay? Without Dad? I think she'll be better than she was. Sometimes people need space to figure out who they are without someone else defining them. Like me? Exactly like you. Noah nodded sleepily. Thanks for fighting for me, even when it was hard. Renee kissed his forehead. You're worth fighting for. Don't ever forget that. I won't. She turned out the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him settle into sleep. No nest in the closet, no fear in the quiet, just a child in his own bed, safe and certain of his place in the world. Renee closed the door softly and walked to the living room. She opened her laptop and pulled up the folder labeled Noah Documentation. She scrolled through months of notes, photos, recordings, evidence of a pattern she'd seen clearly when everyone else had looked away. Then she closed the folder and archived it. It was done. The case was over, but the work of healing for both of them was just beginning. 6 months later, Renee received a letter from Tyson. It was short, handwritten. Renee, I started therapy. Not because the court said I had to, but because I couldn't sleep anymore. My therapist says I have a lot of work to do. She's probably right. I don't know if I'll ever be the kind of father Noah deserves, but I'd like to try to be someone he doesn't have to be afraid of. Can we talk? Tyson. Renee sat with the letter for a long time. She thought about forgiveness, about second chances, about whether some bridges could be rebuilt after being burned. She thought about Noah, who was thriving but still asked about his father sometimes, not out of longing, but out of curiosity, who occasionally wondered if his dad was proud of his report cards, his artwork, his growing confidence. She thought about her own father, who died without ever acknowledging the damage he'd done, who'd never tried to change, who'd never asked for a chance to be better. Tyson was asking. That had to mean something. Renee picked up her phone and called him. He answered on the second ring. Hello. It's Renee, she said. I got your letter. There was a sharp intake of breath. I wasn't sure you'd respond. I almost didn't. She paused. I want to be clear about something, Tyson. I'm willing to talk. I'm willing to consider rebuilding some kind of relationship, but I will never apologize for what I did. And if you ever make Noah feel like he was the problem, if you ever make him choose between us or feel guilty for living with me, I'm done. Permanently. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't about you getting your son back. This is about Noah having a father who can be present without being harmful. If you can't do that, then we end this call now. There was a long silence. Then, I'm trying to be different. I don't know if I can be, but I'm trying. That's a start, Renee said. A small one. Can I see him? Supervise like before. I want him to know I'm working on it. Renee looked across the room to where Noah sat at the kitchen table, working on a science project. He was explaining something to himself in a low voice, completely absorbed. I'll ask him, Renee said. If he says yes, we'll schedule something. If he says no, you respect that. Deal. Deal. She hung up and walked over to Noah. Hey, buddy, can I ask you something? Sure. Noah didn't look up from his project, a model of the solar system he was building from scratch. Your dad wrote me a letter. He's in therapy now. He wants to know if you'd be willing to see him again. Just a visit with me there, but only if you want to. Noah's hand stilled. He stared at his half-finished model. Does he know I'm doing good now? Yes. Does he still think I'm expensive? I don't know what he thinks, but I do know he says he's trying to change. Noah picked up a paintbrush and carefully added a ring to Saturn. I don't want to live with him. You won't. That's not what this is about. Okay. Noah painted another ring. Then I guess I could see him, just to see if he's different. You can change your mind at any time. You know that, right? I know. Noah finally looked up at her. Do you think people can really change? Renee sat down beside him. I think some people can, if they want it badly enough, and if they're willing to do the hard work. But I also think we don't have to wait around to find out. We can live our lives and let them catch up if they can. Noah nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. 3 weeks later, they met Tyson at a park halfway between Chicago and Briar Glen. It was a crisp autumn day, leaves falling in red and gold spirals. Tyson stood by a picnic table, hands in his pockets, looking nervous. When he saw them approaching, something in his face crumbled and reformed. "Hey, Noah." "Hi, Dad." They sat at the table. Renee stayed close, but let them talk. Tyson asked about school. Noah told him about his classes, his friends, his science project. The conversation was awkward, stilted, but not hostile. Tyson listened more than he talked. When Noah mentioned he'd won a school writing contest, Tyson's eyes got wet. "I'm proud of you," Tyson said quietly. Noah looked at him carefully. "Really?" "Yeah, really." After an hour, Noah stood. "I have homework." "Okay." Tyson stood too. Can I hug you?" Noah hesitated, then nodded. The hug was brief, careful. But it happened. On the drive back to Chicago, Noah was quiet again. "What are you thinking?" Renee asked. "I don't know if he'll be able to change all the way," Noah said. "But I think he's trying. That's more than he did before." "How do you feel about that?" "Okay, I guess. It's weird. Like meeting a stranger who looks like someone you used to know." He paused. "I'm glad we left, though. Even if he changes, I'm glad we left when we did." "Me too, buddy. Me too." A year after the final custody hearing, Renee sat on her apartment balcony with a glass of wine and watched the city lights flicker against the night sky. Inside, Noah was asleep, door open, no nest in the closet, no fear in the silence. She thought about the girl she'd been at 18, fleeing the same dysfunction. She thought about the woman she'd become, strong enough to return and end what her family had been too afraid to name. She thought about Noah, who would grow up knowing he could speak without fear, that his needs mattered, that family didn't mean enduring harm. She thought about Tyson, slowly rebuilding himself in therapy, showing up to visits, trying imperfectly, inconsistently, but trying. She didn't forgive him. She didn't think she ever would. Forgiveness required a vulnerability she no longer had for her brother, but she could coexist with him. She could allow him to be a minor character in Noah's life, supervised and limited, there if Noah wanted him, but never again in a position to cause harm. That was enough. That was more than enough. Renee finished her wine and went inside. She checked on Noah one more time, a ritual she'd never break, and watched him sleep with one arm thrown over his head, completely relaxed. She thought about a question someone had once asked her. "Aren't you afraid you'll regret breaking up your family?" She'd answered, "They broke themselves." I just stopped pretending they hadn't. Standing in Noah's doorway, watching him breathe, Renee knew with absolute certainty that she'd never regret choosing his safety over their comfort. Family didn't mean enduring harm. Sometimes family meant being the one person willing to end it, and sometimes that was the most loving thing you could do.